Here we go. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Fully Remote Talk Show. This is a talk show targeted at leaders who are adapting their style to a fully remote world. We're on episode 18, talking about building a remote first meeting culture. Since the start of the show, again, like for these 18 episodes, we've invited a lot of leaders who have established a remote first meeting culture in their organizations, asking them about how they go about doing this, the tactical details of it. And we've collected like a wealth of information about it. And that's pretty exciting that we are going to do that, continue to do that today. And we are going to, I think our questions have gotten a lot more sophisticated, more specific, and more actionable. So we are looking to do something of similar in today's episode. And for us to be able to do that, we have Sarah among us. Sarah, welcome to the show. Sarah, for those of you who don't know, has probably been doing this remote first thing even before remote was cool, which is like for the last couple of years for us. But Sarah's been doing this for nearly 2 decades. And as of recently, she is the VP of engineering at daily.co. She has given several talks and written several articles on engineering and on remote first work culture as well, across different forums as well. Sarah, this is super exciting to have you on this show. Welcome again to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Again, before we go ahead and ask questions to you, I'm going to just check in with the folks over here who are on this show. This is something that we do all the time, is like take a moment to like, if you had a dream job that's not your current job, what would that be? And this like take a single word or a phrase and type in that box over there so we can see what are the dream jobs that we actually have among us. Again, the idea here is to just make it interactive, give you an opportunity to be a participant in this meeting rather than like a passive observer of these talk shows. So Zinc is an interactive meeting platform just so that we can do these experiences. And of course, we're powered by Daily, which you folks are know as like powering our like video experience over here. So let's see over here. I'm going to give like another 10 seconds as people type their dream jobs. All right, let's see what we have over here. Dog wrangler, product TV critic, sounds like something that I should have typed. Architect, warrior poet, talk show. Oh my God, this is a lot more fun set of folks over here than I usually see. Usually I see answers like teacher and like politician and like the more noble causes over here. But I love warrior poet. I see teacher too. Awesome, folks. Talk show. I think, I don't know what that is, but way to go. Awesome, folks. Again, welcome to the show. I'm going to talk to Sarah and ask her questions. You can just jump in and ask any questions you want as well. Like there is a raise hand button over there on the side. Feel free to click that. We can bring you up on stage and like ask questions over here. But Sarah, I'm going to jump in and ask questions over here. Tell us about this whole remote work journey, right? Like you know how things have been in the last 10, 15 years now. So please walk us through like how things have changed over time, specifically like before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now that as we are like kind of getting used to this, how have things evolved?
Yeah. Well, in some ways, remote work goes way back because companies have been working with global customers and with global offices for decades. Well before we had the internet, companies had offices all over the world. And at the beginning of my career, I remember it was common for people to be in like conference calls and sometimes calls from home in the middle of the night because you had to work with people who were on the other side of the world. So it's not a new phenomenon, the idea of distributed work, but the idea of being able to do it from home is relatively new. So we've kind of progressed along from phone to email to Slack and video calls and things that are more synchronous, more obviously synchronous and more high fidelity. And I think that opens up some new possibilities. So certainly before the pandemic, I think we probably had a good 10 or more years of companies that were, especially younger companies, starting to figure out how they could be fully remote, because it just made sense financially not to have to pay for offices. And we had more and more tools for making that work. But I would say also in that same period, as many companies figuring out hybrid, because you'd have people in offices and you had satellite offices and a couple of people who had to work from home for health reasons or personal reasons. And in some industries, like in lots of like newsrooms, journalists were already doing their jobs from lots of places. So that was all happening before the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has really accelerated the big experiment in working from home. Many more people working from home simultaneously and learning new tools. And it also accelerated the rise of experiments in the tools themselves, things like Zinc, and trying new ways to connect over video, now that it's something that almost all office workers have experience with.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is great. I feel like, through the period, as you rightly said, like, people have been like adapting their like remote friendly nature to what we are now seeing as a more remote first nature, right? Like, I think that's like a transition. Do you see that? And I think we talked about, when we talked briefly about like how this is not favorable for everybody. Like, it's like a lot of people are seeing remote first differently. And so what is your thoughts on that? And like, what kind of people are enjoying this remote first nature, as opposed to like who are struggling right now with remote first?
Yeah, well, I think it's not blanket either way. There are some trends. One of the things is the job type. So some people, your job is well suited to working from home and like in a relatively I don't want to say isolated, but it's okay to not be around other humans all the time. Your head's down. A lot of jobs, like designers, for example, are often doing work where the physical thing, being in person together and looking at a thing together, especially uh, actual product design, hard product design, that's really difficult in a distributed way, or harder. I think there are also folks who sometimes their life situation makes it harder to be fully remote or fully in person. So people with young kids who are home find it hard to work from home sometimes, especially if they don't have the space and the childcare at home. Um, at the same time, people who are early in their careers often find it a little isolating because they're expecting to build relationships with people at work in a way that might not be as true for people later on. I would say it's a pretty big range of what people find appealing in going to an office and what people find appealing from working from home. Obviously, a lot of people have discovered that they don't like commuting and that working from home saves the commute.
Right.
They don't like getting dressed. They like eating from home. There are health reasons that it's better to be at home. And sometimes it's better to be with your kids. There's such a big range. So there's not a single answer to like, what's the type of people, what's the type of job. I think that the companies that are really smart about this are either they're hybrid and they're figuring out ways to help people make good decisions about when to come in, or you've chosen one mode or the other and you're really clear with people about what your expectations are and how they can work well in your system.
Got it. So personally for you, would you think that like if you were not in the engineering field, would you have like opted for remote first in this long run, like, or would that have been a different answer for you if you were not in an engineering area?
Well, I first started working for a distributed organization. It was a nonprofit in, I think it was like 1998. We emailed a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I never really wanted to work in an office again after that. I have periodically worked in offices,
Okay.
but for me, it's less about the role and more that I like have my own setup. I like getting my space set up really carefully, and I'm more productive typically when I'm home and focused, and then sort of choosing when I'm interacting with people.
Got it. Got it. So I want to jump in more into like meetings, because I think one of the biggest challenges when it comes to remote first, besides like all the other commute and everything, is like the downsides that people say is that like meetings, or like how it becomes ineffective. And I think we've all like sort of adapted to like new ways of meeting at this point of time. Just tell me about like in general, like maybe right now how it is, or even in your past, like what has the meeting culture been when you are like having um, some people who are remote, or like fully remote organizations as well? Like what is the current way that you've set up your meeting culture?
Yeah. Well, right now, Daily is a fully remote company, so we don't tangle with that question, which is actually kind of nice. There's no drama around the hybrid setup, but I've worked a lot in hybrid organizations too. And the ones who do it best, I would say that there's two things about it. One is kind of a cultural thing, is sort of what is the culture that you want to support, and your meetings are going to be a really big part of that. And so being thoughtful about how you set up your meetings, kind of understanding like meetings have a bunch of different purposes. They're for influencing people, they're for making decisions, they're for connecting as humans, they're for sharing information, but not all meetings are trying to do all of those things. And it depends on the size of the meeting, how it works. So companies that are really intentional in thinking about the goals of the meetings and how it fits with your culture and what you're trying to get out of it, those are the ones, regardless of whether you're in person or hybrid or fully remote, that are most successful. So that's true across the board. But then there is a technical thing. I will say there is one trick to really good hybrid meetings, which is that the people who are in person together in any office are all on their own cameras and have shared audio. So everybody in the meeting, and the principle is that if one person is remote, then everybody acts as if they're remote. So everyone is on their laptop basically with the same video, and you can all see the same things. It doesn't tend to disrupt the people who are in person, and it means the people who aren't in the room can see everybody equally. And the people who are in the room can see the people who are remote equally. Like you can all see each other. And as long as you've shared audio in the whatever the office room is, it works really well. That's my one secret to the hybrid meeting.
I think I've heard this. No, I mean, I think the secret seems like I've heard this like a few times, and I've never seen this sort of done in action. And like, obviously, as you rightly said, like the technical challenges of like sort of echoing and feedback aside, which I think you mentioned that like if you can have a shared audio, that's great. But do you think that's actually like something that people feel a little bit too artificial, in the sense that like, okay, I am here in your presence, we have an opportunity to connect in like this high bandwidth way, and that's literally the reason why I'm here in this conference room. Like, why am I doing this through like this sort of flat screen? And like, do you think there are people who push back on that, or like any thoughts on that?
Well, sure. People don't right away. When you first suggested, everybody says what you said of like, why that doesn't make any sense. Right. But once you've tried it once, you realize you still connect as if in person with the people who are in the room. You are all in the room together. You see each other, you're talking to each other, but then you are also able to stay connected to the people who aren't in the room. And when you choose to use systems where the people who aren't in the room have to see everybody through one or two cameras, and you all see them kind of up on a screen somewhere, it's like they're not really there. They can't really participate in the meeting in the same way. So if part of what you're trying to do is have a meeting where those people can participate as listeners and or speakers, you get that ability without losing the in-person connection by simply turning on cameras for everybody. And the shared audio, by the way, can be the audio and like the mic and speaker from one of the laptops in the room. Depends on how big the room is in the room acoustics, but that works. Of course.
Yeah. I've spent some time thinking about this. Yeah, but this is an interesting topic in itself. But I'm gonna jump to like some interactive question over here, like so that I can actually like tap into the collective intelligence of the folks over here. And I love the point. I mean, I want to jump off of this point that you mentioned around like intentionally thinking about like the different nature of the meetings and having their own purpose or so. And so let's get a little bit more in detail over here, right? So this question that I have right now is like, what meetings are better in person than virtual. And I think this is something that like I want everybody over here. There is a list on the side over there, so you can just start typing your thoughts on this as well, as I am getting Sarah's thoughts. So in your experience, what meetings are better done in person than virtual? Sarah?
Well, I don't want to override what other people are going to say, but I think there's kind of two themes that I have observed. The things people are starting to say, a date.
There you go, a date.
I don't know.
Perfect.
Are dates always better in person? I think things that are generative, brainstorming and some kinds of planning, strategic thinking, are often feel richer in person and more connected, and you kind of get into more interesting ideas. I think the other thing is something where you're reviewing, as I said before, particularly physical things that have been designed, but sometimes other kinds of design work too are, I understand, much easier in person.
I see. So things that are generative, I think I like that word. Like it's like where there is a creative process to it, and then you're like generating new ideas, you're ideating, you're creative, you're brainstorming, and all of those things. And I see like a couple of themes over here around like happy hour and a date, which all like seem to like indicate this class of events that are around like social or more bonding related things. And I'm kind of curious about that. And I think you mentioned that like you made a conscious decision at Daily to like not have in-person meetings for I mean like there's no planned in-person meetings right now. Like tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because so Daily is fully remote company, no offices and no current in-person meetings. The company really grew during the pandemic, and so at a point at which you might start bringing people together, it just wasn't possible, and it's sort of not currently part of the culture. That doesn't mean that we don't connect. So an interesting thing is when you want to connect with people, some company cultures are very much like, let's do the virtual happy hour. Let's have a game show for the whole company. Let's do things that are more obviously social. And sometimes that works really well virtually. If it's what the company cares about and how people like to connect with each other, that can be very successful. Another company that I have worked for that was fully remote had a really big focus on social kinds of things. And although they had met up a lot before the pandemic, they just ported all of that to online video in the last couple of years and have like all kinds of events online, and people love it. That is not the culture of Daily. What people at Daily like to connect about is around work. People like to figure out how we are build stuff together more successfully, and that's equally valid. And I think it gives rise to some different kinds of ways of thinking about how we connect. Like we tend not to do the things that you would say are sort of the social fun, but people really like to go deep on work problems that we can solve together, and that feels really connected for them. And that's, I think, in some ways it works really well over video because people don't have to invest time in getting to the place to figure out how to work together. They really just invest the time in figuring out in the moment, what do we need to focus on to solve a problem.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's good. Now I'm gonna sort of ask sort of the opposite question of this, right? Like I'm gonna jump into and ask, like, what are some of these meetings that are better virtual than in person? Again, I have initially come to think that like in person might have been always superior, but over time I've thought about like like just doing some things where like I have a keyboard and a mouse, and like where I have like access to some other tools are like way much more superior right now. And so I'm curious about that. And like folks, please, yeah, you're already doing that, but like type in your thoughts on this as well. And Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
All right, I have a wild card on this one because no one expects it, but I think that meetings where you're giving or receiving hard feedback are actually a lot easier over video. And that's pretty counterintuitive because sometimes it feels like you really want to be able to connect. But the distance, that sort of sense of distance, makes it a little bit easier, I think, especially for the person who's receiving the hard feedback. And it's a little easier to step back. And if you're feeling bad, you can even turn off your camera. And I think a lot of that makes it just a little bit easier to get through hard calls or hard meetings that in-person one-on-one in a little office sometimes is really pretty rough.
Wow, that's actually a definite curveball. I definitely did not anticipate that. I'm curious about I think I like the point about you can choose to react in a way that is a little bit more personal because you are in your personal environment, and I understand that concept of it. I'm also curious about the nature of building that connection or trust or everything, and how in person might help that, and conflicts or high crucial conversations are opportunities for that. Do you think that might be affected because of that?
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I think it's certainly possible to build trust and undermine it in person or virtually. And my experience is that for the most part, people who are intentional about it do a good job regardless of the medium. It's not that being in person builds trust automatically. In fact, there's some research that shows that people have different propensity for trusting other people. It's just sort of like an innate kind of way that we're wired. And some people trust other people more. I observed years ago that the organizations I was in that tended to be all remote or mostly remote tended to be much higher trust than the ones that were in person. And I think it's because people with a stronger innate sense of trust are drawn to those and don't feel like you need to see the other people working in order to believe that they're working. Your sense is like people tend to do it. And so we trust each other and you're starting at kind of a higher level. So it doesn't of course rely exactly on the people. You need to be intentional. You need to do a good job in being curious about other people and repairing breaches in trust and being aware of yourself when you've done that. That's true no matter the medium. But I do think that, again, counterintuitively, sometimes the fully distributed organizations draw the people who are more likely to kind of believe their coworkers in the first place.
Got it. No, that's actually good insight about the whole trust building part of it. I noticed that in the comments over here, I've seen brainstorming sort of appear in both the better in virtual in person. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that. And I was kind of curious about the person who put brainstorming in as a benefit of virtual meetings. But it makes me wonder, certainly I've done a lot of those at this point. And I wonder if it has to do a little bit with access to tools or inputs that you could grab because you're on your laptop, or if it's just a comfort in your space and it makes people feel more open. I'm curious about that.
And whoever wrote that, if you actually wanted to comment on that, please unmute your microphone and probably talk to it, and I can actually put you up on stage over here as well. It's okay if you don't have to.
I'm not sure I'm ready to be up on stage, but I can if that I'm the person who put it for in this category, partly because I saw it in the last one and I thought it would be a little pot stirry, to have the exact opposite opinion of someone else who already said that. But I do think it maybe similar to what Sarah was saying about people being in their personal space and feeling more comfortable to contribute. I think in general, all virtual meetings are better at making everyone be on the same plane or at the same level. So there are it doesn't take into account height or loudness. I mean, maybe your microphone loudness, but so maybe some people who would be more reticent to make suggestions in person would feel more empowered when virtually, because they're sort of everyone's coming from the same place, or everyone's just a little square on the screen or a little circle on the screen, and that's a very evening out scenario right there. That was my thought about it.
I really love that. And this is going to bring Sarah back up on stage over here. Maybe you can comment on that. But one thought that I had for when you mentioned that is like, virtual is definitely an equalizer. It sort of gives you that. I mean, like, two things that I've heard from people over and over again is like, one, like the non-obvious thing as like, you don't really like look up or look down to people because heights are normalized and like you just don't have to do that. And then the other thing is like everybody has a microphone, which means that there's no like soft spoken people being overridden by like people who are loud, and I'm very loud, and I know that like I actually have a tendency to talk very loud. And so it's an equalizer in that way, and I love that. Sarah, your quick comment on that?
I would say it can be an equalizer. It is true you don't know how tall everybody is. That is, of course, like the great debate in all fully remote companies. How tall is everybody? But I think Vanessa's point is excellent. Like it can really put everybody on the same playing field, but you still do need some norms or some facilitation that ensures that everybody gets a chance to speak, because it's certainly the case that if the system in the meeting is everybody just has to unmute when they're ready to go, not everybody will feel comfortable speaking up. And so you need other systems. It depends on the size of the meeting. That's a big factor, and the purpose of the meeting and how well the people know each other or how often they work together. But typically after you're kind of above 3 or 4 people, you need some agreement about how you're doing things. And the agreement might even be when you're ready to, you stay muted generally and you unmute when you're ready to talk. It can be, we started doing something at Daily. Sometimes we do like people put a hand raise or the word hand in chat when they're ready to say something. There's lots of ways you can handle things like that. But I think actually one of the nice things about virtual meetings is there are more ways to do that. But it does sometimes require real intentionality.
No, I think this is great, and this sort of talks to the vision of where we are with Zinc in terms of like, hey, how can you design your virtual environment in a way that like you can actually like change how people behave in that, and like in like affecting how people are positioned and giving them the camera or like giving them the microphone and like using that as a way to control. And I think there is a lot of this because environment gives the cues on how to behave. If you're in a coffee shop, like the way you behave is very different from when you are in a whiteboard, as opposed to like when you are like say in a ballroom over there, how you communicate and how you talk like changes. And so what is the virtual equivalent of that? How do you design your environment so it's primed for brainstorming or primed for generative discussion? So I love that. Thanks for bringing up that point, Vanessa. This is encouraging for us. I'm going to jump to one last question over here on sort of similar vein is like, what meetings shouldn't be meetings at all, but like probably asynchronous processes. And this is, I think the crowd, if it is a little bit engineering centric, I've heard this to be that like, no meetings should be meetings and like we're better off because work gets done outside meetings part of it. I'm kind of curious, and that's why I put a poll over there as well, is like, if you think that you'd be happy if you never did meetings again, just like click yes on that. And I want to see like what percentage of people over here think about it like that. But Sarah, from your point of view, what do you think about this?
I mean, I love a good meeting. Also, a bad meeting is terrible. So I do think that being really, whether you're fully remote or hybrid or in person, you have to be thoughtful about how you structure meetings, and you have to be respectful of people's time. Like that is critical. So things that are not well structured or thought through, that waste people's time, that have the wrong people in the room, that are better done asynchronously, all of that kind of gives meetings a bad reputation. But I think that some of the things that we get out of meetings, trying to solve problems together, trying to connect, certain kinds of information sharing, are better done in a meeting. And also meetings can be better.
Right. I like the point about like meetings are high stakes. Good meetings are great. Bad meetings are terrible. Yeah, I think like it's an sort of an amplification effect that we have over here. I'm surprised that nobody has a list or any thought of a single meeting that they think should be. And overwhelmingly, everybody thinks that like, no, I mean, I think nobody wants to never have meetings again. So that's a good encouraging sign as well. I know that we are coming more closer to the wrap of this meeting over this show over here. But I had just one or two other questions. But if anybody else has questions that you want to ask Sarah, again, like, feel free to raise your hands, or if you want to ask anonymously, you can just type those questions as well, and then we can like have Sarah answer that. Sarah, like one sort of broader question on this is to say that, like, are companies consciously rewriting their and I'm talking specifically about companies that have in this pandemic shifted from like being in person to being like either like hybrid or fully remote right now. Do you see that like people are like rewriting their culture to include this? And if so, like, how are they doing that?
Well, I'm going to say right here, I got a little distracted by Matt and his baby. And I think that's actually a really good thing and kind of instructive about one of the things that we get when people are working from home is an actual sense of them in like their native environment with their people and their pets and their families. And that's actually a kind of an intimate connection that I tend to feel is really missing when I'm mostly working with people in an office. It's like you kind of just see this one side of them. But when you can see people at home with their babies, it's really like that feels so connected and wonderful. And I think that the companies that are, to your question, kind of adapting in this era have made that a benefit of the work and encourage people to bring your kids and your pets into the meetings and let that be part of work. And also that helps when people say, I can't participate today because I have to take my kid to the doctor, or I have to help with a parent who they've met before. All of that I think is really meaningful in kind of changing our connections and sometimes the company culture. And that's true whenever you have people working from home at all. It's not just fully remote companies, but anytime people are working from home, you have this opportunity.
Love it. Yeah. Hi, Matt. Thanks for like allowing us to just showcase you over here. I love this because I have a toddler and like a 1-year-old, and I do this a lot of times when I think about like connecting with people in person. I love this. We have one question over here about meeting fatigue. How does one fight virtual meeting fatigue? Sarah?
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that earlier. There's not a perfect answer to this. I do think I'm going to risk saying that I think it's slightly better now than it was earlier in the pandemic when everyone's whole lives were on Zoom for a long time, honestly. Right. But it's certainly possible. Like my coworkers here know most days that I am in a lot of meetings, I work on the treadmill during meetings. And so if I have like a 10-mile day, it was a really lot of meetings. And I'm pretty tired at the end of that, not from the walking, but from the meetings. I think that there's a couple of things that both companies and people can do to be mindful about this. So one thing is for companies to have time that you've designated as not the standard meeting time, or conversely, when we expect people to meet. So the last company that I worked for, which was a fully distributed company, had an interesting system of 2 days a week were no standing meetings. And that it was not no meetings. You could actually get everybody together. It was kind of nice because you get everybody together very quickly if you needed to. But you were likely to have a couple of days that had very few or no meetings. And that meant that 3 days a week, you might have a lot of meetings. And those were kind of nice because if you didn't expect to get anything else done, just your meetings, then you could be kind of present and focused and a little less frenzied. It was less tiring overall. And then you had a couple of days a week when you were going to be in fewer meetings and you could be more heads down and do a different kind of work. So that's one way to get at it. Again, not perfect. The meeting days were long, but you knew what you were in for, and the cadence in the week helped. I think at the same time, individuals can be pretty mindful about what you need. So for me, it helps actually to be on the treadmill. I'm like way less tired if I'm on the treadmill all day. And having some balance of when I'm on the laptop and when I'm on a bigger monitor makes a difference. and having a balance of the kinds of meetings. So some meetings I'm really like, I need to be on, and I'm a speaker, or I'm a facilitator. Those take a different kind of energy than the meetings where I'm more listening, and kind of trying to help my coworkers understand how do we have a mix of meetings for everybody, so that people can kind of gauge when are you going to be more on and when can you sit back a little bit. And if you're a person who finds that it's really hard to be on video all day, things like requesting meetings where you're allowed to turn off video, or that's the norm, or you have some agreements about how you use the like muting and unmuting with video and audio. Those are all good conversations to have to kind of help with some of the fatigue.
Love it. Those are very, very actionable tips over there. Like, were quite a few. I wish I had noted it down. But I think that the top tip of using your like Fitbit as like a meeting analytics tool is like a fantastic idea. I think that's kind of what I took away from that, if anything else. I see one more question over here, but I think we can just take it real quick. I know the answer for that is yes, but do more moms not show their kids on the screen? But like, Sarah, quick thought on that?
I think the question is asking, is it more moms or more dads who show their question on the screen?
Okay, that's actually an interesting way to do. More moms.
Well, that's how I read it.
Interesting. Actually,
yes, it's like that.
Okay. That's actually a great question. Yeah.
It is such a good question. I think it might be more dads, because I think that dads feel less stigma. It's more like, when dads if a dad is alone on a plane and brings a kid, everybody's like, how can I help this dad? And when a mom brings kids on the plane, everyone's like, ugh, those kids are too loud. So I think there's like some stigma for moms about having kids. It's just not the same for dads. I will say in the companies that I work for, that difference is pretty subtle. Like more or less all parents have kids on screen has been my experience, but like a subtle favoritism for the dads with kids on the screen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a question for company leaders. Yeah.
Thank you. I asked that because I've been working also remotely for, the past 8 years. And I have seen dads like Matthew with the little kids, right? But moms very rarely. And for me, when I'm working, it's for my kids, like, please don't come around unless I want to show them these are my kids to my coworkers or things like that. But I think it's more common. And I live in Latin America, in Guatemala. And for example, my husband doesn't even want my kids around there doing noises, right? But I told him that has changed because they know you're working from home, and in home you have families, right?
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. By the way, I don't have kids, or if I did, I'd bring them on. Yeah, I have a dog.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. Thanks, Paulina, for sharing that insight there as well. I am like gonna wrap it up unless anyone, Sarah, do you have anything with like one last question? This is like real quick. You might have answered this already, but like if you were to like pick like 3 ingredients in the recipe for successful meeting culture, like what it would be, I want to like capture this from you.
Yeah, I mean, this is like true no matter what the setup is of your company, remote or in person or what have you. But I think being intentional and understanding what the purpose of your meeting is, being intentional about trying to structure the meeting so that you really meet your goals, being respectful of the people who are there, of their time, of their ability and comfort with speaking, as Vanessa sort of raised for us, and kind of showing up as humanly as you can so that you can connect with people. I think all of that makes for the kind of the best meeting culture.
Love it. I think being intentional about the meeting purpose, being respectful of the people who come in, and showing up as humans, the humans behind the employee. I love those things. Thank you so much. Again, before I wrap up, I want to like mention what's coming up next week on next Thursday, June 23rd at 5 p.m. We have Leah, who is the founder of Voice of the Developer. She had a long career at Amazon, and she's now going to talk to us about the effect of remote work on career development. Again, like next Thursday, same time. So if you are available, you should join in for that. This is a little bit targeted more towards like engineering roles and like career development for them. With that, I'm gonna wrap up over here. But like first of all, I want to thank Sarah. Sarah, this was fantastic. Thank you for being on the show. Appreciate all your insights on the show.
Thank you so much. This has really been fun. And it's so like one of the things that's so cool is seeing other ways that we can think about virtual meetings and different tools we can use. Because I really think this is the future, new ways of connecting on video.
Thank you so much. And for folks who are here, if you want to jump in and say something, feel free to do that. If you have like top takeaways from this episode, feel free to type them over here. Sarah, just thanks again. You can take off right now. I would like follow up with you and like get your thoughts on like what the Zinc experience was for you. Thank you. Bye, folks.